we are almost on time. We're going to go ahead with our keynote speaker. So we have Chris Bourg, and she is the Director of Libraries at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, where she also has oversight of the MIT Press. She chooses to believe that libraries can and should promote social justice. Please join me in welcoming Chris to the stage.
Let's make sure this doesn't spill. Okay. Is it going to turn any slides off if I close the laptop? Excellent. Okay. Cool. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful you all are here on a holiday. I know it's not a holiday everyone celebrates, but for me, the day Pitchers and Catchers report is like serious holiday, so, you know. So anyway, I have a couple of confessions to start off with. One, I know I'm overdressed for this conference, and I have to apologize that I will have to leave shortly after my keynote. Once the Association of Research Library folks learned that I was here in DC, no good deed goes unpunished, and there's a committee meeting at 21 DuPont that I have to attend after this talk, which actually we're talking about sort of the future of professional development initiatives for ARL, and especially for ARL directors. And so will someone please remind me in the Q&A that I have a question for you all about that. So yeah, I would appreciate that. The other confession I have is you'll notice I don't have slides. And I was planning a sort of informal talk. I've never been to a Code4Lib. The closest I came was I dropped in on the local Code4Lib that was at MIT. I guess it was 2 years ago. And so even though I'd been given all the information about what this was going to be like, I still pictured a classroom, about 30 people. I could say a few things and then kind of come out from around the podium and sit down and we could just chat. So I'm still hoping that we can do that a little bit. We'll see. It's a little harder with spotlights and an actual stage. So that was one of the other confessions. Another confession is I don't really like keynotes. Like the whole idea that like one person would stand up and like dispense wisdom to the crowd just is really like goes against every ethos I hold dear. It's like way too sage on the stage kind of thing. And I guess especially, the idea that I would have much to say to this crowd is a little intimidating. I've never coded for libraries. In fact, the last time I wrote anything that even looked like code, it was, I think, 15 years ago, and it was SPSS code to run some statistical analyses on dissertation data. I'm pretty sure that my current career trajectory, that's a hard word to say in front of a crowd, means that I will never code for libraries. So I'm not a big fan of keynotes. I don't have expertise or experience in the work that most of you all do. What the heck am I doing up here? But you all pick your keynotes, right? And I just, I kind of had to say yes because I figure we've got to support democracy wherever we find it these days, The other real reason, I mean, there are lots of reasons I said yes, but there are so many people who I love and respect, who are huge fans of this community or are active in this community, and so I just, it was really an honor to be asked to talk here. So I struggled a little bit about what would I talk to you all about. And I do, in fact, believe strongly that libraries can and should be leveraged in the service of social justice. But I've given that talk in a bunch of different places. And my approach generally when I'm asked to give a talk is to try and think very carefully about what I in particular could bring to that specific crowd I'm being asked to talk to that maybe they wouldn't get from some other speaker they might have selected. And here, the thing is, I've been at MIT now for 3 years, and ever since I've had that attached to my name, people want me to come and talk about gravitational waves and quantum physics and artificial intelligence, and I'll do that in a room full of ARL directors, and they'll believe that I know what I'm talking about. Oh God, they're probably watching on the live stream. Not you who are watching. But I'm not gonna try and fake y'all out about things I don't know as much about as other people who are more capable than me. And I thought about talking about MIT's Future of Libraries report and our vision about building an open global platform where we would offer abundant, equitable, interactive access to information. But the truth is, open global platform is just a metaphor when I talk about it, and it's folks back at MIT like Heather and Helen and Matt and Osman and Mike and Jeremy and Richard and Andromeda and Sol. Those are the ones who are actually building stuff. And by the way, they're looking for a department head. Just shameless plug, MIT is looking for a digital library engineering team department head, and we are especially keen on increasing the number of people of color and white women in library tech. So if you are someone you know might be interested, feel free to chat me up afterwards. Okay, so what am I gonna talk about? What could I bring to this crowd that you might not get from others? And again, even though this is a bigger crowd in a different setting than I had mistakenly and through my own fault envisioned, I'm gonna try and keep my prepared remarks pretty brief, no slides, and I wanna have a pretty lively Q&A. I don't think, and I may be wrong, but it doesn't seem like you get a whole lot of library directors giving keynotes here. So I wanna make sure that I give you all time, so start thinking now, you know, everything you ever wanted to ask a library director but were afraid to ask your own, feel free to ask when I'm done here, whether it's about what I talk about or not. Okay, so what I do bring to librarianship is a sociological lens and a feminist perspective, right? And I've done some talks on bias in technology, and I've done plenty of talks about lack of diversity and equity in libraries. And given everything that's going on in the world right now, I was tempted to give a really ranty, like all caps kind of keynote about all the problems in tech and the lack of progress in creating welcoming and inclusive cultures. But I've done that, others have done that. Plus, I just came from ALA midwinter. Were any of you there? Were any of you at, so Juno Diaz, I get to say, my friend Juno Diaz, because he's at MIT, he gave one of the auditorium talks at ALA midwinter, and whew, he didn't hold back, not one bit. It was, I would encourage you to read about it, and also they're gonna release the video soon, I think. So he, he said things like, a profession that is 88% white, that's us, by the way, librarianship, a profession that is 88% white means 5,000% agony for people of color, no matter how liberal and enlightened you think you are. He said this to a room full of librarians. And he also said, and I get to say this because I'm quoting, he said, he said, libraries need to have a fucking reckoning about the pain we cause, and that we need to do some hard work on decolonizing our organizations and our professions. And he's not wrong. And what goes for libraries goes for library tech too. But he said it better than I could. Many of you already know that. And if you don't, then having some liberal white lady, even one as queer as me, telling you again isn't gonna persuade you. So, thanks for the laugh. So we've been talking for a long time, I actually think, about the problem, about we've got a lack of diversity in tech, lack of diversity in libraries, lack of diversity in library tech. And we've critiqued the culture, and we've done some things, and this community especially has done some things, right? We've got codes of conduct, yay. We do better at getting diversity in our speaker lineups, but that progress hasn't been nearly enough, not on gender, not on race, not on queer and trans inclusion, just basically not on creating truly inclusive cultures, where members of marginalized groups are recruited, retained, mentored, promoted, genuinely provided with equitable opportunities to contribute, to thrive, and to lead. And look, I get it. This is a community that does many things right. Code4Lib is a community that does many, many things right. From what I've heard from people I know, this is a community where people feel included. They feel safer. Sexism, racism, transphobia, ableism, and the like are not tolerated. In fact, I sense that many folks from marginalized groups consider the Code4Lib community and this conference to be a kind of haven. And that's great, except that it's not okay that folks need a haven from their own work organization. Like, that's not okay. So instead of the ranty keynote, which I guess I just gave a part of, with all these examples of the problems, I'm gonna spend a little time just sharing what I know to be some solutions, because we sometimes don't get there. We talk about the problem, and that's super cathartic and validating, but we don't often get to the real solutions. And what I'll share is from some recent research I've been reading, some stories that I've heard, and then some of what I'm gonna say is just me trying to use the privilege that I have as a library director to say some things that others have been saying but don't get this kind of a platform to speak on, and maybe don't feel as safe saying. So let me start with the assumption that we all agree that lack of diversity is a problem, that we want cultures that are welcoming and inclusive. And I'll also throw in, I'll also note that there's gonna be a lot that I'm gonna say in the next few minutes that's primarily meant for the white guys in the room. For some of you, what I say may feel like I'm just preaching to the choir. I hope instead it's gonna feel more like I'm equipping the choir. That's the goal. I'm also gonna focus mostly on building inclusive cultures, right? Because as much as we want to throw up our hands and say our diversity problem is a pipeline problem, and I'm so sick of hearing that. How many of you are sick of hearing that? Yay, okay. Right. There's retention data that tells us that we have problems with toxic work cultures and unfair practices that drive women and people out of tech as well. And I'm going to quote some stuff from a report that I read recently, and it's called the Tech Leavers Study. I don't have slides, so I'll slow down and let you. I tweeted it out earlier, and somebody out there is going to look up the link and tweet it out. It was put out by the Caper Center for Social Impact, led by a researcher named Allison Scott. They've got some really sobering stats on the degree to which unfair treatment, discrimination, stereotyping, and bullying in the workplace are the key reasons why women and our people of color leave tech work. Either tech jobs in technology companies and tech jobs in non-tech companies. So some stats like this. Among the people who leave tech jobs, unfairness or mistreatment is the leading reason. People are 2 times more likely to leave their tech job because of unfair treatment than because they got recruited away for a better job, right? Women of all, this won't surprise the women in the room, and hopefully it won't surprise some of the men. Women of all backgrounds experience and observe significantly more unfair treatment than men. LGBTQ employees were most likely to report bullying and to experience public humiliation and embarrassment. Man, we gotta do better. Unfairness, discrimination, and crappy treatment, that's not in the report, that was sort of, drives turnover. It's as simple as that. And it sucks more for underrepresented people of color and for LGBTQ folks. And 57% of the folks who've left tech jobs would have stayed, and this is where we can start talking about solutions, they would have stayed if their prior employer had addressed workplace environment, had addressed the workplace environment and had created a more fair and inclusive culture. So let's talk about things we can do to improve those cultures so that we can move that needle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some individual things we can do, some work group, sort of small group things we can do. This is the sociologist in me coming out, do different levels of analysis, individual, small group, and organizational or leadership. So at the individual level, like, it's actually not enough to simply not be blatantly racist, sexist, or homophobic. Like, that's a minimum. It's necessary, but not sufficient. It's the more subtle forms of stereotyping, discrimination, and harassment that take their toll and are shown to lead to lower retention in tech jobs for marginalized folks. All right, so I'm going to go there. One thing that the men can do and white people can do in mixed race interactions, I'm going to go there. You got to stop with the mansplaining. You got to stop. Like, just stop. Stop doing it in person. Stop doing it online. And what I mean is this, and I know that term is loaded for some people, deal with it. Like, if you have power and privilege in a situation, and if you're white, and especially if you're a white dude, you have power and privilege in a situation, then for the love of baby unicorns, stop giving unsolicited advice and critique. Just stop. Just sit on your hands for a minute. For a minute. Hesitate. Please. I don't know who that was, but I love you. Whoever laughed. Thank you. Like, just practice some restraint. Like, let yourself imagine that sometimes your voice doesn't actually have to be heard. Like, and what I mean is this, don't be the guy who reads the blurb for Safiya Noble's brilliant new book, Algorithms of Oppression, and decides on the basis of a couple of quick Google searches that his research invalidates hers, and then tweet it out. Don't be that guy. Please don't be that guy. And don't be the guy who responded to the article Beth Sadler and I wrote a couple of years ago called Feminism and the Future of Library Discovery, who tweeted out that, man, only people who don't know anything about creating search tools would write an article like that. Now, those of you who know Beth might know that she knows a thing or two about creating search tools and has spent maybe a minute or two doing exactly that. So look, I know it often feels like other people really need to hear what you have to say about a topic. But if you're a white guy, I'm going to ask that you consider all the evidence we have about how women and people of color are talked over, ignored, and shut out of conversations, and think about the fact that the airtime you take up may be the airtime that could have gone to a woman or a person of color. And maybe just decide that you don't have to weigh in on everything. And you definitely don't have to explain things to marginalized people. That felt good. Okay, so what can you do? Well, there's research that shows that to break down stereotypes, what men and other people with privilege and power in situations can do is to publicly vouch for the women and the people of color that you work with. And this is something anyone in a leadership position or other position of power and privilege can and should do. Men can do it for women colleagues, white folks can do it for colleagues of color. And vouching for someone simply means that you talk up their accomplishments and skills, especially in a group setting that is predominantly male and or white. You use your power and privilege to vouch for others. It's really the opposite of mansplaining. And so, some examples. Vouching for someone might look like this. Hey, Tom, have you met my colleague Safiya? She's an expert on algorithmic bias in search engines. She's just published a book based on years of research. That would be one way to vouch for someone. And it's been proven to decrease the amount of sort of interaction, the way that it's been shown to decrease the discrimination and prejudice and silencing that that woman would experience in that setting. So it works. Like, it works. Guys, use your privilege. White folks, use your privilege to do this. So another example is, this is Bess. She has tons of experience developing open search tools. Actually, she was instrumental in the initial development of Blacklight, by the way, for a random example. Bess is I have to mention Bess because she's the person who first turned me on to Code4Lib in this community. So shout out to Bess if you're watching. Yeah. So another thing individuals can do to improve culture and make tech more inclusive and welcoming is to be an active bystander and ally. So, to borrow a phrase that I'm not fond of in other settings, if you see something, say something. So, if other men are talking over women, jump in and just say something as simple as, whoa, hold on, dude, I want to hear what Kathy was saying. It's that simple. If a white person is repeating something a person of color said and is getting credit for it, just say, hey, you know what? That sounds a lot like what Burgess was saying. Let's let Burgess explain it. It's really that simple, but it requires that those of you with privilege actually act. So there are things we can do at the small group, sort of work group level too, right? Just like all politics is local, all culture is local. Well, not really, but there's lots of visible manifestations of culture are local. Man, I've said this part before, and I always people don't like it. So there's research that shows that workplaces that are plastered with stereotypical tech or nerd guy images, so like Star Trek posters and toys and stuff, that has a negative impact on women's likelihood of pursuing tech work and of staying in tech work in general, and definitely of staying in that particular work environment. And man, people love their Star Trek posters. And even the women, right? So a lot of the women will say, but I like Star Trek. And in sociology, we called that selecting on the dependent variable. The women who stay and are comfortable in a situation are comfortable with the kind of culture that's in that, are often comfortable in the culture that's in that situation. It's the people who aren't there that may have left because of this culture that doesn't seem welcoming. So all you gotta do, replace the Star Trek posters with travel posters, right? Don't name your projects or your printers or your domains after only male figures in Greek mythology. Just generally avoid the inside nerd jokes, because that kind of thing reinforces the stereotypes about who does tech. And that stereotype is, in fact, a male nerd stereotype. And I'll tweet out a reference to a study a colleague of mine, Shelley Carell and Allison Wynn, did, where they surveyed women and men in tech companies in Silicon Valley about what the prevailing stereotype is about a successful tech worker. And big surprise, it's a male, nerdy guy who works lots of hours is the stereotype. There's some other pieces to the stereotype, and how well a person feels they fit that stereotype has huge effects on how they rate their own work, how likely they are to feel like they're being successful. And these are women who are in Silicon Valley being successful, and whether they'll stay in the job or not. So, we have to take active steps to break down that stereotype. We can't just roll with it. We have to pay attention and be active. I also want to urge you to pay attention to the kinds of informal socializing you do at work and in those sort of liminal spaces that are kind of work and social and kind of get blended together, right? So, if all the guys go to lunch together and not the women, stop doing that. I mean, just stop. And if the guys go to lunch and they talk about women, then really, really stop doing that, okay? And if there's a core group of guys who go out for beers after work just because you're all friends, that's kind of okay. But if you also talk about work and make decisions, that's not okay. You got to be more aware. You've got to be more accountable to each other for being inclusive. And if you keep inviting people to do the thing that you like doing, you know, that some core of you like doing, if a bunch of you like going out for beers afterwards and you ask the women in your work group to join you and they keep saying no, then do something else that they might like doing. I mean, it's not that hard. Don't shrug it off and say, well, we asked. You know, try something else. Or find a better time for the informal team building that would work for everyone. And look, if some of you out there are like, man, I don't want to give out my beer time with my buds, right? Some of you are like that, so that's fine, but then admit that your beer time with your buds might mean more to you than building an inclusive work culture. Like, just be honest with yourself then. All right, so now that I've told you, give up your Star Wars posters and your happy hours, the rest is easy. So there's some organizational level suggestions. And again, I urge you to read this Tech Lever study that the Caper Center put out. And I'm sorry for the sniffling, it sounds even worse amplified. So what they found was that individual diversity and inclusion initiatives are not nearly as effective at increasing retention of women and people of color as a comprehensive integrated strategy and approach. So some elements of a comprehensive approach would include, you know, obviously top-level commitment to diversity and inclusion, including stated values, goals, and an approach that treats diversity not as something over here that's nice to have, but that treats diversity as a strength, right? Leadership needs to truly understand that diversity isn't just nice to have, but that diverse teams are more effective and better, right? Training is important. By itself, it's actually not so great, but training in a range of topics, including, yes, unconscious bias training, but also bystander intervention training, training on understanding and preventing microaggressions, preventing sexual harassment, how to be a trans ally. A whole set of training topics are important in a comprehensive approach. Another element that often gets left out is a commitment to gathering data and looking at it and using it, right? All kinds of data, hiring data, retention data, internal promotion data, and survey data that is designed to uncover people's feelings of inclusion or exclusion across demographic groups. And it's important here to, again, you know, we look at the hiring data, we look at retention data. Sometimes we miss the informal stuff, right? So when we look at when we make hiring decisions and promotion decisions, and many of us in this room have sat on committees where we do that or have made them, we look at whether you got picked for like project manager or team lead, or, you know, you get picked to do these informal jobs in these ways that the selection process is not formal. And that's what then sort of adds up and accumulates. And if it's, you know, if it's the same people who are always getting picked for that, then it's the same people who are always getting the next promotion as well. So pay attention to that stuff. Another piece of a comprehensive strategy is to develop and maintain some kind of confidential channel of communication so that when people experience bias and discrimination, it can be expressed and it can be handled. And then commit to auditing your practices, right? Audit your management practices, the hiring, the promotion, compensation, internal work assignments. So one of the really, really important findings about diversity initiatives is that training alone is not very effective, right? In fact, in some circumstances, we know that unconscious bias training, for example, and sexual harassment training too, there's some research on that, it can backfire, right? Because the white folks get resentful, the men get resentful, and marginalized folks are sort of put in the spotlight and scrutinized. So training is important, but it can't stand alone. And if you think you're done doing your diversity project by doing a one-shot unconscious bias training, think again. Okay, so I made a bunch of suggestions. I didn't put them up on slides, but I will send the text out. I will make sure the text of this talk is available with links to the studies that I've cited. So I'm going to sum up some of the points that I tried to make. So instead of mansplaining, I'd ask you to vouch for women and people of color. Use your privilege to intervene when you witness microaggressions and silencing. Pay attention to the small group culture that you're creating and that you're contributing to in your workplace, right? I'm sorry, but ditch the Trek posters and such. Be intentionally inclusive in your social activities. Take a comprehensive approach to diversity and inclusion that goes beyond the one-shot training and includes clear leadership. It includes data, accountability, and communication channels. And I think what we really all need to commit to is that we monitor progress on diversity and inclusion the way we monitor progress on any technical system or technology project, right? We check the progress regularly, we pay attention to the data, we look at milestones, and we're transparent about it. So I'm actually really excited about the potential for new library technologies and technical approaches for social justice. I'm excited about approaches that would empower our users, that would open up access to more collections, allow for transformative uses of library content. I'm really excited about that. But I'm afraid that if we don't make a commitment to progress on our diversity and inclusion challenges, then I really believe that what we create and what we build will not be as good or as useful to the range of users and uses that we should be serving. So that's those are my prepared remarks. And I don't like keynotes, and I don't like traditional Q&As. So again, I really was picturing that I could just walk around and sit on the table in front of a small classroom and we'd have a little chat. And we can still, I won't come around because I'll use the mic. We can't do that. But what I'll say is this: if anything I've said has inspired a thoughtful comment, go ahead. You don't have to have a question in mind. I'm actually one of those people who's okay if whatever I've said inspires a comment that is thoughtful, because I'm not going to pretend that I'm up here with all the answers. So comment away. If you want to ask a question entirely unrelated to what I've said, that's okay too. The only thing that I would ask is that we make sure that women and our people of color who want to speak get a first shot at the mic. Thanks very much. Thank you, Becky. And I can't really see because of the spotlight, so I'm not even sure where the mics are, to be honest. Oh, okay, that makes it easier.
Chris. Okay, you talk about the pipeline issue. Do you have some solutions for that? Or things that you guys have tried at MIT?
No, we haven't cracked that code yet. I can tell you that I know for librarianship in general, there is a new program that ARL has just launched, so where we're reaching into actually undergrads. It's called the Digital Inclusion and Excellence Program or something like that. I'm sorry, Mark, if I got that wrong. Where we're trying to recruit from undergraduates instead of waiting until people are actually in an MLS or an advanced degree program. But I actually think that that's, the pipeline problem is in some ways a red herring. That there are, we say that, and then we say that there aren't enough qualified women and people of color for our jobs, but they're out there. We're just not we're not advertising in the right place, and I think we're not attractive enough because of the problems that I've talked about.
Hi, Chris. This is Kate Dybel, and I just
Kate.
want to first say you did ask me to give you a challenging
did.
comment or question. So,
Okay, shoot.
so you made a lot of comments about calling out white women and people of color, which my white woman self is feeling pretty good here, but my queer disabled donkey butt is a little bit kind of put off, and it's one of those where diversity is much easier to talk about and show when it's the visible signs of it.
Yep.
But the same stigma issues really become pretty stronger when it's, you're talking about the more invisible hidden ones that you just can't look at. I mean, well, and, you self-admit you do kind of flaunt, visibly your own queer self, and I celebrate that, but it's a challenge there, and it's something we can't leave the non-visible diversities behind.
Thank you, and I did ask for that challenging. I'm not sure I heard a question in that, but challenging comment, and you're 100% right. I think that we spend too little time talking about other kinds of marginalization and the kinds of, as you called it, invisible identities. And it's a vicious cycle, right? Because my bias is to try and bring data to the talks that I give and to the solutions that I offer. But most of our data doesn't look at these invisible kinds of marginalizations. So, maybe what we need is a call for that kind of data. Because we do a really lousy job with ableism. All kinds of queer and trans issues. We do a lousy job with. You're 100% right. Thank you for bringing it up.
Chris, I want to just interject. Our friend Beth Sadler has a question. She's asking.
Hi, Bess.
Yeah, hi, Bess. How do we get HR directors and department heads to hear what you're saying?
Wow, that's a good question. And I think what I'll say is this. Look, I know I've got I am visibly queer, but I've got a position that gives me a fair amount of privilege and gives me why am I blanking on the word? A bully pulpit? Is that the right? Yeah. So. I try to use it, but I'm going to send it to your HR director and tell him Chris said so. I think that what it takes is those leaders that are willing, those directors and HR directors that are really committed to us making progress and to doing the hard work and maybe pissing off the establishment. Oh God, I keep forgetting that I'm being live streamed and tweeted probably. I think those of us who do have to be very vocal so that others can point to, I'm okay with people saying, well, MIT's committed to doing this and holding our feet to the fire, by the way, because I'm not up here pretending that we have cracked this code, because we have not. But feel free to point to examples of places that are doing it, and I'm kind of hoping that it will be that weird sort of healthy competition that might happen. But that's a great question, Bess, and I think that I feel like in a room full of almost 500 people, I feel like I'm having a one-on-one with Bess right now. You got to find your out there. I believe, and I hope I'm right, that in every library there is somebody in leadership who is an ally on this issue, and find them and use that to crack the door open.
You asked for a reminder that you had a question for us.
Oh, thank you. I do have a question for you. So I'm going to have to leave here and go to some ARL committee meetings, and it's a meeting of a new group called the ARL Academy, and they are trying to devise sort of new kinds of professional development for ARL directors and our staff, right? So my question for you, you can take either parts of it. The one I'm most interested in is, what kind of professional development do you wish your library director got? What topics do you want them to be smarter about? And you can tweet me that if you want, but...
I'm Kate Doey. I'm at the University of Maryland, and I am the person with an inappropriately loud laugh.
Oh, thank you. I loved it.
So, my question, because I think that, as you said, like, I'm tired of this being a conversation about the pipeline, and I'm thinking about, I have been to a lot of terrible management training that is entirely geared towards, and sorry, this is real talk time, white dudes.
Yep.
And I've found that is deeply problematic to sit in a management training session at an institution where they say, as a manager, really you should be focused more on things like baking cookies for your team, right? And that sort of advice, which I've received.
You can't hear me rolling my eyes.
If that becomes an animated GIF, I'll be happy. Anyway, so my question/comment is really like, how does that need to change for women, for people of color, for differently abled individuals, for gay and lesbian, transgendered, etc. people?
How does management training need to change? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah.
And I don't, again, I'm not the person up here with all the answers. But your specific example reminds me of what I think is sometimes a very simple intervention, which is, we, and I did it, and Kate called me on it, right? We often talk about things, and we do training, and we imagine an audience in mind. And we imagine that we want to tell people to do this thing differently than they're doing it now. And no matter how inclusive we try to be, we're always leaving someone out. And I think a simple intervention is a first step is to name it. So I tried to say, a lot of what I'm saying is for you white dudes, right? And so, because I've given talks before where I've talked about, you need to stop mansplaining, and the women are like, yeah, duh. So I think some of it is, I don't think it's a bad idea for some people who are managers to develop a more caring approach to leadership, all right? But I think we have to be very explicit about the fact that those approaches manifest differently for different people and are received and evaluated differently and interpreted differently for different people, and can be used to devalue the leadership skills of women and feminine presenting people, right? So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
This is Naomi Duche. I have a little bit of an answer to that.
Oh, good.
I'm just going to jump in. It's a weenie answer, but if it's safe to do so, give feedback on those training materials and tell them why you're offended or why you think it's not appropriate, and if at all possible, tell them how you think they can make it better. Also, if you have the opportunity to create your own materials based on actual research, not just chatting, take it.
That's great.
I have a small opportunity myself right now to talk about gender and IT. I don't mean this minute, I mean in another context. And I'm really going to try to not just like talk about it in general terms, but look to that small group of people and say, here's what you can do. And so I'm extremely appreciative of Chris's talk and the lead on that article, so that I can say, here's some concrete research-based things you can do. So that would be my best suggestion. and do find that safe place, whether it's
Yeah.
your university ombudsman or maybe there's somebody in HR who will listen, and maybe there isn't. But
Yeah.
don't give up looking for that person if you feel safe.
Yeah, thanks for that save there. That's our old Stanford colleague there. Thanks for the save. Because I was about to mention the ombuds person, and yeah, it shouldn't take that kind of persistence. Let me just put that out there. It shouldn't take that kind of persistence. But if you have the energy and can do it, that's, keep trying.
So I was taken with your comments about a safe back channel, and have been in the kinds of tech environments where really toxic things happen.
Yes.
And there was the institutional policy that there was a safe place to go talk. And I'm a white dude, and I've got a little gray, and I'm kind of dad. And I found myself
Me too, except the dude part.
in a team environment saying, and if somebody has a problem, I'd love them to talk to me. And I'm like, oh my God, I sounded exactly like that other place.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how to make that credible in your organization, particularly in the dynamics where you're the white guy.
Yeah, so I can tell you that some things that we are doing at MIT. One is make sure that people know that if there's an ombuds office, make sure they know about it, and that you make that not some big scary thing. Like that's just normal. Like that is a resource that is out there, and it's okay to use it. And I'm about to get the hook. The other thing that we have at MIT is we actually have an anonymous email that goes to our director of HR. I don't know how it's set up, but it goes to her. She doesn't even know who's sending it. And she sends it to the appropriate leaders to answer, and I get to see all of them. And if we need to anonymize the content of the email, we do, and then leadership responds, or the appropriate person responds. And right now, we have it set up so that all of the comments and questions and the answers and responses are on a public website. So, we, the leadership, are accountable. We're about to switch that so that there's a wow, that's a really big red time's up. We're about to switch that so that there's an option for somebody to say, I want to make this comment or complaint, but I don't want it to be up on the website. They just want to let leadership know that something's going on. So I think that there are ways that you can set up those channels, and it will depend on the culture of your organization in terms of who that goes to, so that the people in the organization really do have some trust in it. So. Thanks very much.